This conference will now be recorded.
I'm going to jump in with introductions. After we get introductions, we'll do for the minutes, and then we'll just lay some ground rules for when you have this many people to operate if you're new to the council. So that's how I suggest we go. And I get Randy's help and get the council to introduce themselves.
John, can you ask people to mute if they're not speaking? A lot of background noise.
That's a good suggestion. Everybody please mute, but then when it's time to speak, make sure you remember to unmute. So if we could go around the council and have people introduce themselves, maybe start with Larry Schoen.
Hi, good morning. I'm Larry Schoen, representing the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. Glad to join you.
And I can't see everyone, so I just have to let people, I see John, so he could go next, but then after that, we'll just have to do it. So John, introduce yourself.
Morning, everybody. I'm John Coombe, representing the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. Thank you, John.
Sania, University of Maryland School of Medicine.
Ross Solowich, University of Maryland Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences.
Jonathan Kays, University of Maryland Extension, representing forestry and agriculture.
Robert Wright, independent consultant. And Kumar, if you want to meet in Starbucks, I'll teach you how to use your Mac, and I'll bring you up to date on the meeting if you want.
Well, that's an excuse to meet with you, so I'll take it.
All right, we'll set it up after today.
Tom Killeen, representing Maryland AFL-CIO.
Nicole Hebert, Air Quality Planner with the Baltimore Metropolitan Council.
David Fraser Hidalgo, Maryland State Delegate.
Megan Latchall. Sorry, I'm a new member and this is my first meeting. I'm representing the Maryland Children's Environmental Health Protection Advisory Council. And my day job is at Johns Hopkins University. I've a doctorate in environmental health sciences.
I'm Ben Hobbs. I'm a professor of environmental management at Johns Hopkins University, and I work primarily in the electricity sector.
I have no idea if I'm next or not. I'm Kumar Barve.
Hello, my name is Sheila Howard, and I am an environmental compliance manager for Baltimore City Public Schools.
Mr. Chasen, are you?
I am, Mr. Quinn. Todd Chasen with Gordon Feinblatt on behalf of the Maryland Chamber. Good morning, everyone.
Do we have any other council members on the line that want to introduce themselves, please? That's great. Any other elected officials that haven't announced themselves? Well, we're moving right along. And Dr. Latchall, I'm sorry, I was going to introduce you at the end. Welcome and to joining us. And sorry, it's a little clumsy when we do these introductions Zoom, but we're so glad to have you. And thanks for participating. And your expertise will be very helpful to this council. So that's what we have for introductions. Tad and Randy, do we want to do the broader everyone on the line, or are we going to save that for later in the meeting? What do you think?
I think we probably don't have time to do everybody on the call, but I do think one of the things we want to do at the beginning is make sure that people use the chat box to let us know if they want to make a public comment during the discussion of either the deep regulations or the tampering regulations. So if people could use the chat box, Randy and Carol, and we'll put together a list of the public who want to make comments so that we can try to fit that into the time we have to get through the two regs.
Yeah,
my chat box doesn't work. I keep clicking on it and nothing happens.
we'll make sure you get your voice heard, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. That's great. So I was going to do this after, but it's the right time. So the way we normally have these meetings run is we get a presentation from a department spokesman, subject matter expert, etc., on the regulation we're talking about. And then we have the council members ask questions and discuss it among themselves. And after we're done that, we open it up to the broader audience. So I'd like to keep it to that, just to keep order. And so that's, as the rules are presented, we'll do that. We'll have the presenter from the department, then we'll have questions from the council, discussion if necessary at the council, and then we'll give others an opportunity to speak on each item. Does everyone understand that? Great. And then the next thing on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from last time. Council members, you've all seen those and they've been in your hands. Do we need additional time to quickly look at them? Or are we ready to put them up for, I'll accept a motion to approve them if we're ready.
So moved, Larry.
I'll second.
Thank you. Anybody want more time to quickly review them? I'm not hearing any, so we'll do a voice approval if there's no suggestions for changes. Do I have any suggestions for changes to the minutes? All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
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 Any opposition? Not hearing any. Minutes are approved. And we'll jump right into the VEEP amendments. I'll turn it over to Tad.
Well, John, a real quick introductory piece. We do have a lot going on at ARA. The two regulations that you all approved months ago are now up and running and being implemented. The hydrofluorocarbon phase out for climate change is now in place, and it's being implemented with little problem. The methane reduction program from the natural gas industry is also fully adopted and being implemented. And again, it's being implemented fairly smoothly. There's always some issues at the beginning of a process, but again, congratulations to you all. I have been approached by at least 10 different states about what we've done with both HFCs and natural gas. So we're sharing our work, and there seems to be a trend within the states to continue to do work similar to that we're doing. Obviously, California and some other states are right where we are. The federal government is also looking at federal action on methane and federal action on HFCs. So part of why we did our regulation was to create that pressure for national regs, and that seems to be working as well. We don't have time today, but we have this very interesting initiative going on linked to our environmental justice activities, where we are working with communities that have put up air quality sensors across their whole community, and we are using those sensors to do targeted inspections. In other words, we're looking for hot spots in the sensor data and wind direction, and we're trying to link it to potential sources, whether it's a stationary source or a bus terminal, or, to be totally honest with you, a great big intersection with lots of cars. So at a later date, it's a very interesting initiative. It's working extremely well. And I would like to, one big thing going on at ARA is we've had a really tough month in terms of losses of staff. And in particular, I think many of you know or knew Brian Hugg, a very, very real expert on air quality, a great leader in the air quality world, great leader in ARA, and a really good friend to many of us. He did pass away a couple weeks ago. And so it's been very difficult for us. And I know it is a little corny, but I'd love to take like a 20-second moment of silence and let everybody think about Brian Hugg and what a great contributor he was to our process. So for 20 seconds, just let's think about Brian. Well, great. Well, thank you all. And we do have two really important regulatory initiatives on the agenda today. So I think I'm with John. We should probably just jump right into the presentations and get the discussion going. We're going to start off with the Vehicle Emissions Inspection Program modernization effort. There seems to be some misinformation floating around about what's going on with this program. So it is a little bit of a detailed briefing because we wanted to get the right information out. So it's going to be a tag team between myself and Daniel Newell, a good young person in our vehicle inspection program. So Randy, why don't we just get moving? I think everybody knows the ground rules for these meetings, but we do flash them up at the beginning of each session. So we are recording. And please, if you can, keep your mute button on while you're not talking. That's a wonderful thing. And Randy, if we get to a point where the video cameras start to constrain our ability to do this, lead up the bandwidth, we may ask folks to start to turn off their video cam. So I'm going to do the introductory part, the easy part. Daniel will do the meat. So the VEEP program has been a huge part of our program and our air quality progress we've made over the years. We have made huge progress over the past 10, 15 years. I'll show some of that in a minute. But vehicle emissions technology has changed dramatically. What was going on in the 90s is the fleet is totally different in the 2022, 2021 timeframe. And so, yes, we've been working to phase in modernization steps to the VEEP for a few years, and this is a fairly important one. So we'll go through that for the rest of the presentation. Next slide, please. A little history slide. So again, originally adopted in 1984, a significant update in 96 to meet the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments. And in those days, yes, unfortunately, we had probably some of the worst air quality in the country. And yes, vehicles were very different, much higher emissions, deteriorated more quickly. Emission control systems were very different, much less effective. Next slide, Randy. And again, when started, the VEEP program focused on reducing volatile organic chemicals, VOCs. And in those days, VOCs were actually believed to be the key to reducing ground level ozone. What happened is researchers and other folks did a lot of work, and what we actually found is that in the East, nitrogen oxide reductions are the key to driving our ozone down. And as we've reduced NOx, we've seen ozone drop dramatically. And so NOx testing did begin in 1996, but it is always historically focused on VOCs. In 2021, everything's changed. Vehicles now include onboard diagnostic systems, which are mini computers that pretty much manage your emissions control system and other systems within your car. And it has really changed the game. And the OBD system has really allowed us to do a lot of modernization. And again, the modernization is also linked to significantly improved customer service. I know you all know this, but the Vehicle Emissions Inspection Program has been probably the least liked program I've ever implemented. When I go to a cocktail party and people say, "What do you do for a living?" And they say, "Oh, you do that VEEP program." So anyway, modernizing it is very important, and because of technology and cleaner air, the time has come. So let's move on. Just a little bit of comparison so we can look at the difference between the way the world was when this program was implemented and the way it is now. When it was originally implemented, we were severe ozone non-attainment area, and only areas in California were extreme or worse. And nowadays we're marginal, and marginal is the very cleanest you can be. And this year last 2020, we had the lowest number of bad ozone days we've ever recorded, 3, compared to 71 if the 70 parts per billion standard were in place in 1996. In the 90s, we had statewide exposure to ozone. In other words, we had exceedances of the standard across a lot of the state. And now we have very small areas. Last year, just 3 days in a very small part of 1 or 2 counties where we barely went above the standard. Had a lot of other air pollutant issues in the early 90s, fine particle levels, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, and many more. In 2021, we're attaining every other air quality standard except ozone. And the levels of ozone have dropped dramatically. Next slide, please. Vehicles are very different in 2021, 2020 than they were in 1996. Emissions of both NOx and VOC are down dramatically. For NOx, the vehicles are 98% cleaner than they were in the early 90s. Same for VOC. And these onboard diagnostic systems, again, have changed the game. In the early 90s, very, very small, less than 1% of the fleet was equipped with advanced technology. Now 98% of the fleet is equipped with the advanced technology, and the warranties have changed. In other words, the vehicles last longer, 50,000 miles for 5 years, 150,000 miles for 15 years in 2021. So both the air quality is dramatically different now and the vehicles are dramatically different now. And that does allow us to modernize the program and increase customer service to Maryland Motors. Next slide, please. Again, I've said this multiple times, the time has come to modernize. We are not the beginners. We are not the ones that have started this. It actually started in California, who happens to be the state with the worst ozone problem in the country and the best technical expertise on mobile sources. And so they were the one that began to modernize the program to make it simpler, easier for consumers, but still effective to deal with ozone. And we have had previous modernization steps. 2002, we ended the dynamometer testing. It was the beginning of the OBD testing era. 2009 was the end of the dynamometer. 2018, we added some new steps. We delayed testing of new vehicles up until year 3 and began phasing in the OBD only program. Today's effort will pick up on those, and it is significant effort. And again, it's made possible because of the dramatic improvements in technology and the air quality improvements. It is important to recognize that what we're doing is 100% consistent with the Clean Air Act and 100% consistent with the existing authority that we've been given through the state legislature, where the statute was adopted in 1991. Next slide, please.
I'm just going to jump in real quickly. There's still a couple people that haven't muted their phones. Please mute because it comes in occasionally. Thank you.
Next slide, please. I will run through this quickly because the council has already seen this, but it's really important for the folks who are focused on the vehicle emissions inspection program to understand all this. We have a long history. And yes, most of our history on air quality has been very bad. I've been around for all of it, 30 plus years. 2005, we had some of the worst air quality in the country. A very, very critical study in 2005 by MIT basically said that Maryland's air is the riskiest air to breathe anywhere east of the Mississippi. It was a very well accepted study, and to be honest with you, our fine particle levels were so high, it was true. We had some major problems. In 2008, EPA designated Maryland, actually the Baltimore area, as the worst ozone area anywhere outside of California and Texas. So some not so great accolades for Maryland in the early 2000s. Next slide, please. That's changed. We've dramatically improved air quality, particularly over the past 10 years, and I'll go through some of the reasons and some of the details of that. But this is just a graph that shows how far below all the standards we are for all of the pollutants except ozone. So fine particles, which was the riskiest place to live in the east of the Mississippi pollutant, we're not only meeting the standard, we're well below it. Ozone's a struggle because of transport. We still run a research program with University of Maryland, and we continue to have about 70% of our ozone problem in Maryland on a bad day coming from states outside of Maryland. So it is by far our biggest challenge. Next slide, please, Randy. Fine particles, again, huge public health risk air pollutant. Not that ozone isn't, but fine particles is linked to early mortality. And again, huge success story. At some point, I think somebody's going to write a wonderful paper on this about being one of the most important environmental risk reduction programs ever implemented. But we've seen our fine particle levels drop dramatically. And again, this is a problem where some of our highest levels are in our urban areas. Unlike ozone, where our highest levels are generally upwind of the urban areas in areas like Cecil County, because of the way the air pushes the pollution and the chemistry involved. But next slide, please. Ground level ozone, our most pervasive problem. It's never been in attainment in my career in Maryland. It is a complicated pollutant. It involves several different emissions, nitrogen oxide and volatile organic chemicals, and they have to have a photochemical process that turns them into ozone. So it's a very difficult, complicated pollutant. Emissions come from everything from power plants and cars to the dry cleaner down the street, to trees. Next slide, please. A little bit of history. Yes, in the past, we were amongst the worst air quality areas in the country. The MIT study said that. The EPA designation in 2008 said that. So in the past, yes, we had a reputation that was not good. However, next slide. The present. It's very different. The air is much cleaner. Every pollutant in attainment except ozone. And ozone 2020 was the closest year we ever had to getting into attainment. And with some of the changes we're seeing in Maryland, I expect us to come into attainment with the ozone standard in the next few years. Will there be a new tougher ozone standard? Yes, EPA is working on that. I think there eventually will be. And so our work is not done, but and there will be a new fine particle standard as well. So our work is not done, but I think we have the formula for success, and we're just going to keep following it. Next slide, please. I'll go through these quick, but this is just the number of bad air days each year over time. If you go back to 1990, that bad air days column would be about 120. And that's just the summertime days. So you can see progress, and you can see that in 2020, we had the lowest number of bad days that we've ever had. And again, those 3 days were very isolated incidents where just one monitor of the approximately 25 in the state went over. Just a small area was high, not the whole state. So next slide, please, Randy. This is just a, next slide, please. Sorry, we had animation there. This is a spatial look at our problem, 1998 compared to 2020. So it's not just the fewer number of days, it's the reduced exposure to folks across the state. This is actually a better way to look at risk reduction. And what you can see is that the reds are bad, purples are really bad, greens are really good, the yellows, greens are pretty good. So just huge progress spatially, huge risk reduction from our ozone program comparing 1998 to 2020. Next slide, please, Randy. What's driven the progress? Hundreds of emission control programs. I'll just highlight a few of them. And since we have a few legislators on the phone today, I will have to give credit to the legislature for the Maryland Healthy Air Act. It has been the single most important program implemented in the 2009 to 2012 timeframe to drive down both ozone and fine particulate. We said it would work, and it did work. Other key programs for smokestack sources include RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and the 2015 NOx regulations, which this advisory council approved, have both dramatically helped us lower ozone and fine particulate. Mobile sources, just dramatic progress. There's a lot more progress to be made in mobile sources, but the 2007 Clean Cars program, again, a legislative initiative that made Maryland part of the California car program. In simple terms, what it means is that the vehicles sold in Maryland have to be the cleanest vehicles allowed by law. There have been federal initiatives, tailpipe standards called Tier 2 and Tier 3 tailpipe standards have helped not only in Maryland, who came into the Clean Car program, but in upwind states like Pennsylvania and West Virginia, and a whole lot of other mobile source programs. We have some things coming towards us, electrification of medium and heavy duty trucks, more stringent NOx standards for heavy duty trucks, probably one of the last remaining big emission sources of NOx in our inventory. So there's a lot more to be done. There's a lot that's been done, and our work is still cut out for us, but the progress is very evident. So next slide, please.
Tad, speaking of legislators and mobile sources, we did have a question of whether do electric vehicles contribute any pollutants, and the more specific is that the question is, once heard that electric motors and generators emit ozone.
So electric vehicles are zero emission vehicles, so they have zero emissions. However, they have to get their power from somewhere. And so usually that's electricity. If it's a electric vehicle, and yes, that's why our efforts on electric vehicles are also linked to our efforts to move towards cleaner and renewable sources of energy generation. So it is a little trade-off, but it's actually a whole lot cleaner, even with the electricity being generated the way it is right now. And there are some small sources that actually generate ozone, but the ozone that we measure, we have about 28 monitors across the state. It's really coming not from the generation of ozone, but from the emissions of ozone as a byproduct linked to NOx and sunlight, and ozone is formed because of that. So just a couple highlights from the Healthy Air Act. Again, I've already said, single most important ozone and fine particular cleanup initiative we've ever implemented. Just dramatic reductions of NOx in the 2009 timeframe, and they continue to drop over time. Next slide, Randy. Even more, we've also seen a lot of changes in the power industry. We didn't have the SO2 slide for the Healthy Air Act. That's even more dramatic. That's where I was going. I forgot we dropped that one for time. But we have a lot of change in our power sector. A lot of our coal-fired plants are now either retired and no longer running, or they are scheduled for retirement and will soon no longer be running. So again, by the 2025 timeframe, virtually all of our large coal-fired power plants will have ceased operation. Warrior Run, a smaller coal-fired power plant with a contract that extends through 2030, will be no longer operating after 2030. We do have gas and oil units within facilities, but even that is changing. The demand for other electricity sources, renewables, battery storage is still, it's a remarkable trend that is taking off quickly. So next slide, please. Again, 2007 legislation, cleanest car is allowed by law. We have other incentives that we hope to try to keep working through legislation that allows folks to more easily buy electric vehicles and help support electric vehicle infrastructure. And there have been Tier 3 vehicle and fuel standards, which have been extremely important as well. One piece I'd like to mention is the diesel efforts that we've been able to implement throughout the state. Huge reductions around the port because of a partnership between MDE, MDOT, and the port. Also, the Volkswagen settlement has given us a lot of funding. And a different day's briefing, a really good one, is how much have we reduced diesel? It's a dramatic and very positive story. So next slide.
Tad, quickly, a question from the council. Do we expect that the bad air days will go up for 2021? That's part one of the question. And the answer to that is it already has. It was hard to beat last year's 3 ozone days. We've already had 6 this year, I believe. So Tad, if you want to embellish.
Yeah, no, we have had some higher ozone in the spring of 2021. We're still within within a shot of attaining this year. However, one of the most important things about the days we've had high ozone levels on in 2021 is the 2 big days were transport events. We had some of our research equipment up, and the incoming ozone on the 2 bad days we've had this year were either above the standard, above 70 ppb, or right at the standard. So I wasn't going to go into it today, but transport is still a huge part of our problem, and we have a whole bunch of legal actions that are pending against Pennsylvania and West Virginia and some other states. And so, and last year was a strange year because of the lockdown. The traffic was way down. So when I said I think we will come into attainment, I said in the next few years. I do think we're on a trend to see that happen. I think the power plants, the coal-fired power plants shutting down will have a major role in helping us get there. And the Clean Cars program continues to get better and better each year. So yes, last year was a bit of an anomaly. So at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Daniel, who's going to run through the rest of the program. So Daniel, it's all yours.
Thanks, Tad. Thanks everybody for attending. My name is Daniel Newell. I'm an engineer for ARA, specifically Mobile Sources, working with the Vehicle Emissions Inspection Program. So without further ado, I'll just jump right into it. So we've got older technology vehicles. So when older vehicles were on Maryland roads, VEEP was critical and provided significant air quality benefits. These vehicles were big polluters in the 80s and 90s, but as newer and cleaner vehicles began to constitute a larger portion of the population, VEEP has become a smaller factor in our clean air progress. Larger reductions can now be had from power plant controls, controls in upwind states, heavy-duty truck improvement, and vehicle electrification. So the technology game changer, new vehicles are now 98% cleaner than new vehicles were in the 80s. Things like catalytic converters, fuel mixture controls, electronic controls, and computer advancements were all key contributors to these emissions reductions. And all of these advancements are integrated into a vehicle's OBD, or onboard diagnostic system. OBD allows for modern and increasingly more stringent standards to be possible. OBD monitors virtually every component that can affect emissions performance and identifies if it's malfunctioning or deteriorating. And it ensures that these vehicles will retain those low levels that they were designed to meet throughout the lifetime of the vehicle. It started as an engineering analysis system for automotive designers, and it's evolved into a very powerful emissions monitoring and testing system. The technology advancements that have pushed the Maryland fleet to be dominated by newer, cleaner cars, combined with the process to refresh the VEEP contract, have made the modernization of VEEP essential. Oh, yeah, next slide. So when it comes to our testing technology, current emissions technology, our emissions testing technology is far superior to our previous methods. OBD testing is now possible on the vast majority of our fleet. It's much more thorough and virtually non-invasive compared to the older test types. It's possible on all 96 and newer passenger vehicles and has been more recently introduced in heavy-duty vehicles. I'll be getting into a little more detail of that. OBD testing also provides us with some very nice opportunities for increasing customer convenience, which I'll also be getting into. So VEEP modernization. So just as a quick rundown as to how our program functions, who does what? So VEAP is a joint venture between Maryland Department of Transportation Motor Vehicle Administration, or MDOT-MVA, and MDE. Significant contractor support is also a major part of our program implementation. MDOT-MVA handles our day-to-day operational oversight and contract monitoring. MDE provides the technical oversight and ensures the program quality. And the contractor performs the testing, and they operate and maintain the testing stations and kiosks. And our VEAP regulations are listed below if you'd like to know where they all are. It's COMAR Title 11, Department of Transportation Subtitle 14, etc. So our current program, we've got 2 test types right now. We have OBD, the onboard diagnostics, and idle or a tailpipe test. Testing is delayed for new vehicles for 3 years or upon change of ownership. So what that means is when a vehicle is new, it's 3 years before their first test, or if they change hands, if through a private transaction, their test will become due. So OBD is available on 98.44% of our fleet. This includes 96 and newer passenger cars and light trucks, and on 2008 and newer heavy-duty vehicles that are under 14,000 pounds. The idle test represents a much smaller 1.56% of our fleet. That's for 2007 and older heavy-duty vehicles that are under 14,000 pounds, and for 77 and newer heavy-duty vehicles that are between 14,000 pounds and 26,000 pounds. So VEAP reinvention. Back in 2015, we introduced kiosks to our program. In 2018, we started step 2 with our regulatory changes. New vehicles got 1 extra year delay until they get tested. It was 2 years. Now it is 3. We began phasing in the OBD only program by exempting pre-96 light duty vehicles. And today we're talking about step 3, our additional changes starting in 2022. So as to step 3, this is our VEAP modernization effort. It'll consist of the following features. We've got motorist assistance centers, or MACs, as I'll be calling them the rest of the presentation, and other types of motorist support. We're talking about a 6-year delay of initial vehicle testing for new vehicles. Completion of the OBD only program phase in by eliminating the VOC only lower tech idle test. Improved kiosk functionality, implementation of emerging remote OBD testing via either onboard telematics with things like OnStar or through plug-in devices, and private sector assistance for motorists who may choose to have their VEAP test completed using remote OBD. So what are the immediate VEAP changes? So this 3 additional years of delay for initial testing. It's going from the current 3 years to 6, and newer vehicles will still be tested on transfer of ownership. Enhanced MACs and other MDOT, MVA, and MDE initiatives to dramatically reduce initial failures through early customer assistance, really working on improving the program and improving effectiveness. Adopting an OBD only program, cessation of the outdated idle testing. It's the most cost-effective option moving forward. Again, the idle test only affects VOC emissions, which are no longer considered critical to reducing ozone. We see this is a common sense streamlining to allow Marylanders to benefit from vehicle technology and all of the air progress that we've made in recent years. So going into the 6-year delay, we're following California's lead, which is already at an 8-year extension. These newer vehicles have a failure rate of 1.3% collectively. They're extremely low emitting, remarkably dependable emissions control systems. I believe they're all tier 3 at this point. And when building new vehicles, manufacturers are required to demonstrate that low emissions levels are long lasting and backed by robust warranties. And at the bottom, you can see, I was just going to describe that at the bottom. You can see how much the NOx portion from vehicles has shrunk as an in terms of fleet average for new vehicles as time's gone on. The 70s were a very different car than compared to today. So this is just a graph showing initial OBD failure rate by vehicle age. So the vehicles we're talking about exempting are on the left. Collectively, they've got about a less than 1.5% fail rate. The vehicles to the right will still be tested. Those are the vehicles that we see failing the test. Next slide. So going into motorist assistance centers, this enhancement is going to include an emissions repair specialist available at the stations for support. They're going to be assisting motorists and the repair industry so that we can get the right repairs done on these vehicles the first time. The improvements in repair success will carry through to multiple VEEP test cycles. This will reduce overall fail rates and ensure continued air quality progress. MACs are becoming a common enhancement among other states' programs to ensure effective, lasting emissions repairs. This is an especially important component of the program given the complexity of modern vehicle emissions technology. The repair industry oftentimes struggles with modern emissions repairs, and having an expert on hand will really help make these repairs much more effective.
Daniel, if you don't mind, we have a few questions.
Sure. Yeah.
I'd like to come in. Delegate, if you care.
Yeah, are you ready for me to ask? This is Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo.
Please.
Yes,
please. Okay, thank you. So this is my first call. I'm learning a lot. So thank you very much for affording us the opportunity. So I know it was mentioned earlier on the ozone reductions in 2020 to 2021. I think it's important when we talk about this to place a pretty big caveat on it, that it's, the 2020 numbers are the result, which I think was said, of COVID. If people didn't ask that question, we might move forward thinking that, oh my God, we just made all these great inroads. So I think it's important moving forward that when we talk about 2020, that's an anomaly. And I think it's important to make sure that we state from the very get-go that 2020 is an anomaly due to COVID. I guess that's less of a question and more of a statement. But then we'll go to the next questions that I have. And again, this is my first meeting on moving forward with OBD only. And exempting some of the older trucks that are really, really dirty. And, when I kind of look at all that in the context of what happened with Volkswagen, I start to ask myself a lot of questions, and I start to be very concerned with depending on these manufacturers to be in compliance. And if please correct me if I'm wrong, but is the OBD only basically where you plug it in and one computer talks to another computer, and is that correct?
Yeah. Well, this is Tad Aburn, the air director. It's partially correct. I mean, one of the things that is really important for folks to recognize is that the idle test really only affects VOC emissions. And what we found over the past 20 years is that the VOC emissions are really not, they certainly don't hurt, but they really have not driven the progress on ozone. And so therefore, it's almost a part of the VEEP program that's really not needed. I mean, just to give folks a feel for why VOC reductions are less effective, about 80 to 90% of the VOC emissions in the state, Ronald Reagan was right, come from trees. And again, there's been a lot of research on this. It's not a silly number. And so VOCs and the OBD tests really don't do much, if anything, to help us with our ozone problem. The other part is that those older vehicles are disappearing from the fleet at a dramatic rate. And I think we have a slide on that coming up that shows how that's going to phase out over time. So I think your points are, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, I think your points are very good and correct, but I think that where we are with this program indicates that OBD only is by far the smartest way to go, and that the older vehicles that are left are going to be phasing out very quickly. And even the reductions from those that we get from the VEEP program don't mean that much because they're VOC reductions. And so on the pandemic issue, there has been some good research done between some of my scientists at MDE and some scientists at University of Maryland that actually concluded that 2020 was not driven by the lockdown. The reductions that we saw in ozone were within the same trends we've been seeing from the control programs. Clearly, there had to be an impact on the smaller amount of emissions from mobile sources had to have an impact. But the trends we saw in 2020 and 2019 and 2018 are really solid. And so again, ozone is a very tough pollutant because if you get a bad weather day, like we did 2 days in the early spring of 2021, where pollution is pushed from West Virginia and Ohio and Pennsylvania into Maryland, it just gives us high levels. And so we got to deal with that transport issue. But we think the trends will continue the way they did. The lockdown, the pandemic was an interesting year. I wouldn't give all the progress, however, to the lockdown. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, it is helpful, and I guess we'll have a better idea as we get further into 2021 what that actually looks like as far as a trend comparing to previous years, since COVID is kind of an anomaly, and to some degree, I guess you could argue the first part of 2021 is a little bit of an anomaly too, because things are just opening up now. But I guess to my question about exemptions for older trucks. I know trucks can stay on the road for a lot longer in some cases, and what we're doing compared to California as far as testing older trucks. And again, getting back to the OBD issue, like I don't, just to be quite frank, I don't have a lot of faith that the car manufacturers' computers are actually honest. And I think everybody on this call, everybody should be very concerned about whether they're honest. And I don't know a lot about it. I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know a lot about it, other than I don't trust Volkswagen and I don't trust these car manufacturers to do the right thing. And if their computer is telling our computers something, that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So, how do we address some of the older trucks that maybe aren't going to be tested, and how do we address a level of any kind of trust that we have that these OBDs are actually complying with the law and producing accurate information?
So on the issue of trust, it's very I can totally understand how, because of the Volkswagen situation, there are a lot of folks who are less trustworthy. In general, that manufacturing sector does a really good job, and we have enforcement programs, and we have both state and federal people watching what's going on. Yes, we had the Volkswagen situation. There's no denying it, but generally, I feel very confident that the emission reductions that are required to take place because of the phase-in of tougher vehicle standards is happening. And California is the poster child. They have a huge program, and I understand why there's some hesitancy about the trust of this industry, but the program is clearly working. There's testing done. And so I am not in the least bit concerned that the progress we've made with vehicles, including trucks, is going to continue. On trucks, one of the initiatives, the governor is part of a group of 15 states working on on the electrification of medium and heavy duty vehicles. We think that is a huge positive initiative. It's been the speed at which the market is adapting to look at both battery technology and infrastructure for and the vehicles themselves, the costs are going down. We think that's the place to go for medium and heavy duty trucks, the electrification route. Our current goal is to work really hard and have some dramatic improvements in electrification in the 2030 timeframe, and elimination of have nothing but electric trucks in the future. But one of the big issues is incentives for infrastructure and technology. So I think there will probably be some legislative action next year on some of these issues, including incentives for medium and heavy duty truck electrification. So again, again, we have some slides on this coming up, but that part of the fleet is also it's not the biggest trucks, but the medium trucks and the small to medium trucks. Those vehicles are phasing out quickly. So, and again, the emissions associated with them is not that critical. So again, I hope that answered your question. Delegate, again, I know my boss, Ben Grumbles, has offered this, but to the extent you guys ever wanted us to come visit and walk through every single question you ever had, we're happy to come do that. This has been a very good part of our program. We have a lot of people who are quite expert on it. So please feel free to invite us down if that's something that you think it would be helpful.
I will. I want to thank you for the information you gave me. I mean, I still have a lot more questions, and I don't want to occupy the entire time and take it away from other people. I think that on the incentives, we don't really have an incentive program moving forward right now. On electrification, we have an incentive program that backfills what we already did with some very small incentives moving forward. I think it's important that we try and figure out how to continue those and find revenue sources to continue those incentives. I look forward to working with the governor to figuring that out. To be quite frank, I haven't had a lot of luck with working with the governor on this in the past, so I want to try and figure out. I'll still come back to the well again to try and figure out how we can some of the trucks. And then the last thing that I'll say, and then you know what, maybe we can do a VEEP visit to talk about this in more detail, because I don't think this is the time for us to take our foot off of the proverbial gas pedal when we talk about phasing out internal combustion engines. And one of the things that was said was that I think the quote is something along the lines of, we find the direction that this program is going as the most cost-efficient option for Maryland. And that comment gives me great pause, because I'm not as interested in the most cost-efficient program for Maryland as I am interested in reducing all of these emissions as much as possible and the fine particulate matter, so that Marylanders can breathe more freely. So as far as the most cost-efficient option, like, I will tell you that term gives me great pause. So maybe we could do a meeting at one of the VEEP stations and walk through some of these questions in more detail. And I'll kind of leave it there. Thank you.
Tad and Daniel, sorry, one more question coming in from the council.
Could I just wanted to add one more thing to make sure. I wasn't sure if it was understood. It may have been. The OBD test and the idle test are also exclusive to their own groups of vehicles. So OBD tested vehicles have not been idle tested as well. So this is only for the non-OBD vehicles already. Just want to make it clear.
Thank you, Daniel.
In the earlier slide.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks. Oh, go ahead, Ray. Sorry.
Daniel, how do the revised testing schedule provisions overlap with typical new vehicle warranties? And how do the changes to VEEP dovetail with the defeat device enforcement?
Hey, Randy, I'm a little worried about timing. I know we have a couple key people that have to leave a little early, and I don't know, John, if you want to put all those types of questions till the end. That didn't seem to be a question linked to the presentation, but a more general question. How would the council like to handle that? Because we got a lot to go through today, and a couple key people are leaving, I think, soon.
Yeah, these meetings can go that way because there's so much knowledge out there and so much information. I suggest we get through the presentation and then address the priority questions at that point.
Works for me.
Thank you. And we'll share these questions with some of our experts on here. Maybe we can do some chat responses.
Okay.
So, Daniel, next slide.
Yeah, go right ahead. So as to other motorist-friendly assistance, so we've already got the Macs that'll improve our repair industry, or not already got, but we're going to be getting these Macs, which will improve the repair industry's ability to maintain vehicles. M.MVA has also implemented an important computer system upgrade they're calling Customer Connect. That includes an online portal to provide motorists with direct access to their VEEP information and related apps. People can get notifications of their VEEP due dates. They'll be more aware of when the test date's approaching, making the program more effective. MDE will continue to work with the repair industry to ensure that technicians have access to the training, skills development, and diagnostic tools needed to perform effective emissions-related repairs. There's other efforts to assist Maryland motorists under development. And the overall goal of these efforts is to implement customer-friendly technical assistance to reduce initial failures as much as possible. Next slide, please. So when it comes to an OBD-only program, we're exempting the small number of remaining vehicles that were built before OBD computer controls. They're rapidly retiring from the vehicle population. Heavy-duty vehicles are also making the transition to OBD compliance. Idle testing of vehicles only affects VOC emissions. Pre-OBD cars and light-duty trucks were exempted in 2018 as the first step of implementing this OBD-only program. And as we've said a few times before, the idle test has no impact on NOx emissions. Next slide. So what's remote OBD? This is sort of the iPhone version of VEEP testing. It'll be a voluntary program, emission snapshot, no continuous monitoring. This is exciting and rapidly evolving technology. Remote OBD provides the opportunity to test your vehicle yourself or at various facilities, currently possible with the telematics installed in many cars. It takes advantage of existing technology, piggybacking on the onboard electronics, or it can be like a dongle conveniently located at repair facilities or dealerships. Remote OBD technology can allow for motorists to test at their convenience. It increases consumer choice and customer convenience. Your next VEEP test could be right down the street. Maryland's looking to follow in the success of Oregon's remote OBD program. Additional testing outlets. Marylanders will soon have the option for testing at new testing outlets. In addition to existing stations and kiosks, motorist options may include remote OBD tests done at a select number of repair facilities and dealerships. This option will provide motorists with private sector assistance to submit their VEEP test using remote OBD technology. Next slide. So going into the regulation changes, we've got our proposed amendments. There's three key ones today. Amendment 1 is the new vehicles will get tested after reaching age 6 instead of age 3. Then we have the final step of a phase-in of the OBD-only program. Amendment 3 defines max just to help us, set that all up. And other amendments, various cleanup revisions are included in the proposal as well. So here's the regulatory language for year 6. We are removing of the bracketed text and changing 36 months to 72 months. And next slide. So we're adding our definition for a motorist assistance center to our regulatory language. It means a resource center operated by the contractor that provides technical emissions related repair guidance to motorists and vehicle repair technicians, as well as the administration or the contractor may require approval by the Motorist Assistance Center prior to issuing a waiver. these are various sections just to facilitate future use of MACs. And then for the completion of our OBD only phase in, we're switching the 04B to say exempt vehicles include the following: of a gross vehicle weight 8501 through 14,000 pounds and of model year earlier than 2008, and of a gross vehicle weight of 14,001 through 26,000 pounds and model year earlier than 2013. So what is the impact here? So for the OBD only, while Veep tests 1.5 million vehicles per year, only 1.6% of them are currently idle tested. These older vehicles are rapidly retiring from the population. Heavy duty vehicles that are 8501 to 14,000 pounds are already being OBD tested for model year 2008 and newer. And as we're looking at refreshing our contract, the model year 2013 plus vehicles over 14,000 pounds will be remaining subject to inspection requirements, as they'll be switching from the idle testing, which is what those vehicles are being now, to OBD testing as they now support it. Idle testing, again, only affects VOC. Next slide. Estimated benefits, about 260,550 motorists will benefit from the additional 3-year delay in testing. 20,000 motorists with pre-OBD vehicles will no longer need to have their vehicles tested, resulting in a $5.36 million in cost savings to these motorists, to Marylanders in general. The next slide. So we have negligible emissions reduction losses. The total impact is quite negligible. With MACs and other program improvements that we're planning, we're looking at an approximate 0.02 tons per day NOx increase. Without any of those such improvements, if the program was just run with the less vehicles and the idle test, there's a maximum potential NOx increase of 0.2 if we did no other things to improve the program. But we are, with MACs and other repair effectiveness initiatives, we're looking to see the lower numbers more likely. For comparison purposes, we've got 2015 power plant regulations. They achieved over 20 tons per day of NOx reductions. MDE legal action against upwind power plants have or will reduce NOx emissions by 40 tons per day. The anti-tampering effort will achieve over 5 tons per day in NOx reductions. And state efforts to electrify the vehicle fleet will eventually drive NOx emissions from vehicles to 0. Next slide. So what about climate change? Well, Veep testing has a negligible effect on emissions levels of greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles are based primarily on the CO2, which is based off of the fuel consumption. It's estimated that these regulatory enhancements will have no effect on the state's climate change efforts. Maryland has made dramatic progress towards reducing greenhouse gases, and we've been implementing initiatives that will continue this trend. If you'd like, the link is below for our 2030 Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Act plan. So implementation. Next slide. Working with EPA. EPA has and continues to encourage states to modify their programs as air quality progress allows. This in order to take advantage of better technology and adopt things like OBD-only programs. States have the authority to make these changes. Many other states have undergone or are planning to do similar program modernization. MDE is working with EPA to ensure compliance with all federal requirements, and EPA has already approved all the sorts of changes that are being proposed today by Maryland in other states. So just for comparison, here are other states that have similar model year delays. Maryland is currently in 3, but we'll be not taking the lead here, going up to 8. We'll be around the middle of the pack in 6 model years tested, or after 6 model years. Next slide. So here's our regulation adoption schedule. Today we've got AQCAC. In August, they'll be sent to AELR. We've got our notice of proposed action in September. October, we'll have our public hearing and comment period. More specific date will be known soon. And in November, we've got our notice of final action, and these regulations will hopefully be effective in December. So just a quick recap, because it was quite a lot of info. As part of our continual program enhancements, we're looking to extend initial testing for vehicles out from 3 to 6 years, complete the phase-in of our OBD-only program, and implement MAX. These changes are part of the VEEP reinvention that we started in 2018. And these enhancements, along with future testing options and remote OBD, will allow for a more customer-friendly, streamlined program. Next slide. So today, we request from AQCAC a favorable vote so that MDE and MDOT-MVA can move ahead with these regulation changes with the support of AQCAC. Next slide. So now is our time for questions. This is when we're doing them.
Yeah, I have a question. I put it in the chat. This is Jonathan Case. It's about the kiosks. They result in paying less, obviously. And I know out in Washington County where I live, there is no kiosk. So is that part of this? I don't see it mentioned, but it just seems a little unfair that for some people they pay less than others. And the other thing I'll just mention is that with regards to the protocol of this council, I thought it was my understanding that's initially pertains to people that are members of the council. And I just kind of wonder a lot of time that for non-members of the council that there is a question and answer period at the end when those things should be dealt with. So I just wonder about whether what's appropriate and what's not. Thank you.
So Jonathan, this is Tad Aburn. On the issue of the kiosks, yes. Kiosks are something we see as an evolving part of the vehicle emissions inspection program, and as part of the process over the next few years, as we see how consumers take advantage of the kiosks and the kiosks get better, and also the remote OBD piece, there's a potential that those efforts would be expanded in the future, but that's not part of the immediate plan. And on the protocol, I know historically we have usually limited the first round of questions and comments to the council members, but because I think we had some legislative interest and those folks' time is extremely valuable, I think the chair was okay with letting some of those questions come in during the presentation. John, you want to add into that? You are right, Jonathan. Usually we do limit the initial round of questions and discussion to the council members.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. But we have the chair of the Environment Committee and one of the leaders in the legislature on these issues, and their input is critical. And we really want to get the best result from our meeting today. And I think having their input added to it rather than take away. So we can have a discussion offline if we should revise our protocols in any way.
I understand what you're saying. I just think in terms of the length of it and the detail that, this isn't a committee meeting. It's, with regards to all the politics that are involved. So I understand. I just wanted to mention it. That's all.
This is Carolyn with MDE, and I might just let you all know now, there have been a few requests, mostly from council members that they do have some questions, and I can either read through them or we can give everyone a chance to discuss. But there is also someone that from Sierra Club, Lindsay Mendelison, that has requested to speak as well. So perhaps
if I might, Carolyn. So I suggest the council members' questions should go first, and then we'll see if there's any discussion that follows that, and then we'll go beyond the council and get questions from outside.
Great. Yep. But that's we've only had that one additional request. So I'm running back up to where one of the first questions came in, and maybe it was John Coombs. I can read your question, or would you like to open up and give your comment now?
Yeah, let's let John ask it.
Okay, Carolyn, let me, I'm scrolling through, making sure I find it because we have a lot of text in the chat area.
Hey,
I got
I can
it.
read it for you.
I found it, thanks. So my first couple of questions were, first, how does the revised testing schedule, or how do the provisions of the revised testing schedule overlap with a typical new vehicle warranties? And how do the changes that are being proposed dovetail with the with defeat device enforcement?
So for
Marshall or Peggy or Daniel, you want to handle the first part of that?
yeah, in terms of how they line up with vehicle warranties, I believe a lot of manufacturers out there offer a 5-year warranty now, or at least some of the more efficient ones. But when it comes to the emissions controls on a vehicle, the newer vehicles coming out have it's actually a bit of a complicated, like, but generally speaking, it's a 15-year warranty for how long their emissions controls are supposed to demonstrate of their effectiveness. So I believe if anything goes wrong with the emissions controls, those are covered beyond that 6-year window.
And John, on the question of defeat devices, those vehicles are primarily diesel who aren't part of the VEEP process. However, the next regulation we're talking about will outline in a lot of detail why this has become an increasingly important issue and what we're going to do about it in Maryland. So, so there's not a whole lot of linkage to VEEP, but we do have an initiative we're going to talk about next.
Okay, thank you, Tad, and thank you, Daniel. Let me do my follow-up question real quick. Daniel, you talked about the potential downside in NOx emissions from these proposed changes and the upside in terms of cost to Marylanders. Is there any estimate of a change in program participation facilitated by these changes that may result in an environmental improvement?
And by that, do you mean participation as in adding new vehicles to the program, or you mean improved repairs and the like?
I mean in terms of the number of Marylanders who participate and comply with the program requirements. Is that expected to change at all?
So with things like MAX and our improved communications, we have estimated that the impact will be less than the overall impact. I believe in the slides it was a 0.02 if with implementation of all of these initiatives versus 0.2 if we tons per day if we didn't implement any of these increased participation and effectiveness initiatives.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I keep hearing MAX and I don't know what that stands for. Can somebody help?
Oxides of nitrogen.
No, MACs
MAC.
are MACs are motorist assistance centers.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so Daniel, I
have a bad headset. I'm sorry.
I think I may have misunderstood. So you're saying that the smaller downside number for NOx was in view of enhanced participation because of some of these features. The higher NOx downside number would be potentially realized if the aspects of the improvements to facilitate participation were not there. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, the larger number is like if this 6 model year exemption and idle test was dropped to today with no other initiatives to improve our program, that would be our absolute maximum. But with all these other initiatives, we're predicting it. We modeled it to be a little to be 0.02.
Understood. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I saw on the chat that both Larry and Ross had a question too. So let's make sure, Carol. I'll let you direct who's next.
Okay, I was just going down the list from earlier. Robert Wright had a question in at 9:56.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, okay, this is Robert. My first question is, I realize that transport's a big issue in terms of the overall compliance. Are you able to separate out how much comes from transport and how much is generated within Maryland on a particular day when we're in exceedance?
Yes, we do a research program with University of Maryland. Again, the weather changes every day, but on bad ozone days, at least 75% of our problem originates in a state upwind of Maryland. And then within Maryland, what we see is that the sources that are most culpable for our local are coal-fired power plants. And that's why the retirement of coal-fired power plants and the controls on them over the next few years are going to also be a critical part of reducing local emissions. 0.2 tons per day, which is the upper bound on the loss reductions from this program, is a minuscule. It's, you know, the 2015 NOx reg that you all approved was a 20 ton per day reduction program. Our efforts on upwind power plants are about a 40 ton per day. So this can be implemented with virtually no change in the progress we're making on air quality.
Okay, thank you. I had another quick question. What's the funding source for MAX?
Daniel, I can take it for you guys. This is Marsha with Mobile Sources, and the $14 test fee is going to cover the MAX. So it's going to be spread out over the program. It's not going to be an additional cost for anybody that wishes to use their service.
But it's covered in the fee that the consumer pays, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay, well then it looks like Larry Schoen was next to sign in.
Okay, I think I have myself off mute. So I put my question in the chat window to everybody, and I'll say it orally now. My question comment relates to real-time monitoring of vehicles in the way that I've been told has been effective to find the high-polluting vehicles, which is you put a real-time portable emissions monitor on acceleration ramps to freeways. And so to me, that would spot several problems. One is, at least historically, it was a small number of vehicles responsible for most of the emissions. So this would enable you to find those vehicles. Secondly, it would spot defeat mechanisms, whether they're instituted by a manufacturer or by individuals. And the third and larger issue for me is this trust issue that was brought up by folks. And it's not just the percent of emissions, but it's people's confidence in the whole system when you've got people cheating on the system or a few vehicles that are responsible for the emissions. So, you know, motor vehicles are not my field. I'm a mechanical engineer, but field validation of data is essential for almost any engineering or scientific activity. And I don't know why we haven't put, well, I know why we haven't put this in, because people don't like the intrusiveness of snapping a picture of your license plate and taking real-time data about your emissions and then getting a letter in the email saying that your vehicle is non-compliant. So that's why we haven't done it, but maybe this is the time to reconsider that type of system.
So Larry, if you're interested, we can have a separate session on that. But those roadside visual vehicle snapshots, they really don't work very well. Virginia runs a program, and the bottom line is that the only vehicles that get a break because of that program are vehicles that are in the first 6-year time frame. And so we've looked at that. We think that simply exempting the first 6 years is the cleanest way to get at the same issue without investing a lot of money into technology that doesn't work real well. So it is something that's happening. However, there is some real cheating going on. And our next regulation, we're going to walk you through that. It's by far the biggest area of cheating on motor vehicles, and our tampering regulation is going to really start to ratchet down on that part of the process. So the remote sensing that you're talking about is something we looked at, but it really doesn't work like people think it would. And two, it really just links to the cleanest new vehicles, the people that, and so we're just doing it simply the way California's done it with exempting the first 6 years. And I did see a question about why not 8 years, and we did consider that. So, but Larry, if you wanted to talk through some of our data on the remote systems and why we don't think they really do a good job, it's just a waste of money, we'd be happy to do that.
Well, if you had some research papers that you could direct me to, I'd be glad to look at those.
Okay, we can do that.
I didn't know
Carol,
if Nicole Habert wanted to add her comment at this time.
Hi, yes, this is Nicole Hebert with Baltimore Metropolitan Council. And I was just curious how we landed on 6 years as opposed to, like, say, California, who also has a higher ozone problem. They're at 8 years now. How do we land on 6?
We looked at 8. We decided for a whole bunch of reasons, including phasing in and dollars, that 6 was the best number for us right now. It could be that over time, if we see this program continue to improve and the ozone continue to get better and better, that we will at some point move in the direction of another number, not 6. But we did consider it. It was looked at.
Yeah. Could I also add, in the graph that we saw, that I had, that showed the failure rates over time, we saw that beyond 6 years is really when the failure rate starts to ramp up, and it goes beyond 2%, just beyond 6 years, and ramps up much more significantly beyond that. So that was another factor in our decision.
Got it. Thank you.
I think Dr. Solowich was next to request to speak.
Thank you. Good presentations. A very quick comment and then a question. So, while today the VOCs are dominated by biogenic sources, that hasn't always been true. And so the VOC reductions have been incredibly important in the long history of the improvement in air quality, the anthropogenic VOC reductions. My question is, I was very surprised to see throughout the presentation the notion that the idle testing really only gets VOCs out of the cars. And that's kind of a little confusing to me, because if a catalytic converter fails, I would think prodigious NOx would come out in addition to VOCs. So my question is, what is that statement based on?
It's based on the MOVES model. So removing the idle test does not change the VOC levels within the model. If anybody correct me, I don't work directly with MOVES, but.
Okay, that's a great answer. And I hate to say this so bluntly, but I don't believe it. We routinely test MOVES all the time and find problem after problem with MOVES. So, okay, it is what it is. You might want to be a little bit more critical of that statement when you go for public comment and that sort of thing. Like if you actually have real idle testing data from the VIP historical that can back that statement up, then I would believe it. But if it's based on MOVES, forget about it.
Ross, this is Marcia. When we test for the idle test, we do not test NOx because we don't put the vehicle under load. So we only get VOC numbers from doing the test.
Ah, okay. So you don't know what it does for NOx because you're not measuring it. You're not testing for it. Okay. So, I mean, and this does kind of come back to the point then. So Tad said I think I'm going off of memory now, 0.2 tons per day. I could ask Tad how he really knows that number as well if you're not measuring the NOx coming out of the failures of the idle. But but I don't want to dig into that level of weeds. I mean, I kind of understand that if we can trust the vehicle manufacturers, and if there aren't defeat devices in widespread use, then this is, in my opinion, a good idea. But I think that you probably are going to have some leakage in NOx as well as VOCs by skipping the idle testing.
So again, I know that MOVES is not the favorite model of some folks, but it is a very good model, very well grounded in some research. I know it's not perfect when you think about what the MOVES model is trying to do. It is a Herculean task, and so I think that will improve over time. And if folks have misinterpreted to say that VOC reductions don't mean anything, that's not correct. They have a small positive impact on ozone, but what we're hearing from our researchers nowadays is that the wave of the future for VOC reductions is going to have to be some very targeted VOCs like propylene that are not mobile source related VOCs, but it's still an issue. Don't misinterpret us to say that VOCs are a total waste of time. What we have clearly seen is that NOx reductions is clearly linked to the progress, not clearly linked, is driving the progress we've made in Maryland. And so we've been very NOx focused for the past 15 years, and we have a lot of proof that shows that NOx reductions work and work extremely well. But thanks, Ross. We know you guys do great work, and we know not everybody loves the MOVES model, but it is the very best tool we have, and it is pretty well grounded in a lot of technical work and research. So I know there's always room for improvement.
Well, at this time, I'm not seeing any other additional requests, but the council could continue discussions, right? But I did have Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, who also requested to speak again, and we do have one or maybe two outside comments when you're ready. So
thanks, Carolyn. So I just want to open it up to the council if we want to have any conversation here before we go to those two quickly. Anybody on the council wants to put anything out at this time?
Well, I mean, I'll just give you my advanced impression is I'm not going to be comfortable voting for this until we get some more information about the questions I've asked, and Ross has asked, and others have asked. Great comment. It gives us a directional thing. So I suggest we first go to the outside person from the Sierra Club that you said asked to speak, and then we'll go to the delegate again, if that's okay with everyone.
Oh, hello,
Carolyn,
yes, and I think Lindsay Mendelson.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, it's very faint.
Okay, I'll try to talk louder. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, great, wonderful. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for letting me comment at today's meeting. My name is Lindsay Mendelson, and I'm the transportation representative with the Maryland Sierra Club. And I do want to stress that we are a little concerned that this is happening prematurely, this regulation, before there's a comprehensive analysis that's released to the public. I do, note that there was the factoid today presented about the 0.02 ton NOx increase, a small increase, but I do think it's important that there's that analysis around that figure and also how this would impact criteria air pollutants as a whole and greenhouse gas emissions should be released to the public so that we folks can make an informed decision on this. I mean, this is the purpose of the vehicle emissions inspection program, is to reduce air pollution. And so I think it is important that that's based on meeting our goals. I also do want to note, the beginning of this presentation was focused on how we made a lot of progress on cleaning up air pollution. I think that's great, but I also do want to note that we are still in non-attainment of ozone, and also a lot of advocates, scientists, public health officials do think that the current federal standard for ozone is still weak. And so I think we need to be really careful and make sure that this process is driven by data and by science. One thing that I also think should be really taken into consideration for this analysis is that the idea that folks might get a tune-up, on their vehicle before they go into into testing, and that might not happen if that testing is delayed. And so I think that specifically should be taken into consideration. The other thing that I also want to stress as well is that I think it is important that this proposed regulation before it moves even further is that there's an analysis on environmental justice communities, specifically how, especially heavy duty vehicles, especially the ones that don't meet onboard diagnostic testing that would be exempt, might have an impact with higher levels of localized air pollution. And then the other thing as well is the economic justice implications, just making sure that, folks that might have older vehicles, how that might disproportionately impact them if they have to go in more regularly for testing versus other communities. And then finally, I don't know if this is something that is being proposed, but I do recall earlier that there might have been some discussion about potentially closing some testing sites. And so I do think there should be an analysis on how that might impact folks that might have to drive further to get that test, potentially in rural areas. And I think all of that should be taken into consideration and analyzed before moving forward on this. Thank you.
They were great comments. Tad or Dave, do you want to reply?
So I'm trying to figure out which piece to reply to. I think that the data on the clean air progress is extensive and complete. Our ozone is dramatically down, and we're within reach of attaining the ozone standard for the first time in history. We are in attainment of the fine particle standard. Matter of fact, that came in 2012, and that the fine particle levels continue to go down to the point of Maryland will be in attainment with the new tougher PM standard if and when EPA sets it. On the vehicle side, there's a huge amount of testing and data on the vehicle emissions reductions improvements over years. Those numbers, the 98% numbers, they're based on a huge amount of testing. And so I think the data to support this initiative is there. It's actually been there for quite a while. That's why California started this 8 years ago. And I think what a lot of folks are struggling with is that for years and years and years, this was one of our critical programs to clean the air when the vehicles were different and we had so much progress we needed to make. The VEEP program was a critical part of our program, but to be totally honest with you, it is no longer a critical part of what we're trying to do to clean the air. If Congress were to rework the Clean Air Act amendments right now, I believe the inspection and maintenance requirements would no longer be in the Clean Air Act. They've become that small a piece of the emission reduction progress. The vehicle technology has just trumped any benefits from the vehicle emissions inspection program. So Lindsay, I hope that answered your questions. And again, the offer is out to you guys. You guys ever want to grab us and we'll meet somewhere, you can come to our offices, we'll come to your offices, we'll do it remotely. We're always open to talking through this thing, but this is a very, very old program that was very, very important a long time ago. We're modernizing the best we can. It continues to be a mandate in the Clean Air Act, so we cannot eliminate the program, but we're trying to make it as consumer friendly and continuing to be effective as part of our clean air cleanup plan. It's really a program that provides tremendous customer benefits at virtually no loss of environmental protection. So I hope I got to there was sort of a bunch of questions in there. I hope I got to at least some of them.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep things moving along since we're getting to the end and go to Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, and we'll go back to the council then. So I see there's questions here.
Thank you, John. I will be quick. I really appreciate everybody's time. This is my first meeting. I learned a lot. I appreciate all of it. And the last kind of question I have is, do we in Maryland and I'm not sure, I don't know the answer to this, which is why I'm asking, do we in Maryland, for some of these older vehicles and older trucks that we are exempting, do we charge them any kind of like an exemption fee of any kind? Or do we just exempt them?
No, we don't. We would require legislation to do that.
Okay, that's good. I mean, you know, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that we are going to continue to struggle on Clean Cars Act and Clean Cars legislation as far as funding sources. So perhaps some legislation that charged for some of these exemptions could be used to help fund future initiatives, because that's going to continue to be a challenge as far as where we get the money to fund some of these initiatives. So thank you very much. Thank you all.
California has a piece that's like that. So we've looked at it, but it's definitely going to be something that if we did it, it would have to be a legislative requirement.
Yeah, and I think if carrot and sticks, I think, you know, depending on how we structure that, you know, a fee of $50 to $100 would probably be sufficient. I'm sorry, Megan, I saw you throw your hand up there. No? Jonathan's shaking his head like, what are you, crazy?
I'm just scratching my head.
Thanks, Delegate. I suggest we go to the council. I saw Jonathan putting his hand up a bunch of times. Jonathan?
Yeah, I just come back to the kiosk requirement because the person from Sierra Club mentioned it, but you know, in rural areas, I know like in Washington County, there may be others where there's no kiosks, and you know, you continue to have to pay the $14 where I'm told, well, if I go to Frederick, I only have to pay $10. Of course, I have to drive to Frederick. And I don't know if there's a possibility, maybe this isn't part of this legislation, but there really should be an effort. There should be kiosks in all of these places. I don't see any reason why, you know, you have to pay $14 instead of $10. I'm just curious, what's behind that, or is there some way to make that happen?
Well, Jonathan, I think that you are on a good track, and I think it's clearly within the long-term plans of the program that to the extent that the kiosk technology continues to work or improves the way it works, and the demand by consumers is there is both the possibility of expanding the kiosk program, but I think the other piece that is even more important is the remote OBD requirement. This, if you're set up with those telematics in your car and you want to, you can do your Veep test from your home. And if you are not as comfortable with that technology, you can go to your local service station who will have that kind of technology and can help you do it. So, but yes, the concept of putting in more kiosks is not off the table. It's not part of the very first set of things we're doing. We want to see how those technologies continue to improve and how consumers react to those new technologies before we do any expansions. But Jonathan, you are right. It's very possible. We talked about that quite a bit. And I think it's something that may happen over time, but expansion of the kiosk program is not in the first step of this.
Okay, thank you.
And there have been, I mean, the kiosks have been very successful, but it's been a challenging technology for consumers to get used to. For every consumer who says, I loved it, there's 2 consumers that said, when I got there and plugged in, I couldn't make it work. So it's an evolution that's happening, and it's going to take some time.
I see Robert's hand up.
Yes, in response to meeting the standard for ozone, I realize we're almost there, and hopefully we'll get there soon. I think it's this body's mission to not try and make a standard, but to either say we're going to meet the federal standard or be below it, or if the state of Maryland would like to have a more stringent standard, for them to pass legislation. I don't think we should get off on to saying, well, you know, it could be better, and decide to go that way. I think our objective is to see whether it meets the current federal standard or whether it would meet a state standard. And if people want to more strict standard, then I think their lobbying efforts should be at the state level or the federal level. Just a comment.
Bob, I don't disagree with you, and our goal at MDE is to not just meet the standard, but to continue to lower risk from ozone exposure by getting as far below the standard as we can, based upon common sense, cost-effective, reasonable programs. I will tell you, and I'd be happy to share our analysis. We've done a lot of analysis of this issue of pollution from upwind states, and we've got a very good analysis of Pennsylvania power plants. If Pennsylvania power plants were implementing the rules that Maryland already has in place, we would be seeing about a 5 or 6 ppb reduction in ozone on the worst days. And for those of you that understand how the test works, only the worst days matter in terms of attaining the standard. The 4 worst days each year averaged over a 3-year period. So this issue of transport is one. That's why we've been in court going after Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky. And we've, our research program, flies airplanes and uses ozone sound balloons, and we measure incoming ozone that's at or just below the standard. So that is the key issue we have to deal with to drive our ozone levels down. Continuing to do the right thing in Maryland, we continue to do that. We have regulations we're either implementing or adopting, but local emissions reductions do help. But the key thing that's driving us into continued non-attainment is emissions from upwind power plants in Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky. And that's why we're in court.
I just want to keep moving things along if I can. So any other comments or questions from the council members? Not hearing any. I'm just going to ask Carolyn, are there other people waiting in line to speak?
I'm not necessarily seeing so.
Good. Well, if there's someone has a strong desire to speak, please send put something in the chat to alert Carolyn, and I'm going to go back to the council and just get a sense of where we are and what we're thinking about this, and maybe some direction from Tad on what he's asking for specifically. Larry had a good comment earlier. He thinks he's not ready. And Tad, you're looking for approval of this rule today, correct?
Yes, we are.
And the presentation is done. David, you're done, right?
Yep, we're done.
Okay, Robert, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm supportive of it. I don't know what additional information would come forward that would help me make a decision. So I just want to let people know that I think we're relying. Now, when we hear the next presentation about what kind of cheating might be going on, maybe I'll change my mind. But right now, I feel that we have most of the issues in hand and would be supportive of this regulation.
So if I might, just because we've had so much conversation, good comment, Robert. Tad or David, could you just give us the 2-sentence overview of what you're asking for? 3 sentence, some short, concise thing, and then I'll move to have the council act on your specific what you're asking for.
Okay, so we'd love to have a motion to approve the regulations as provided to the council. We'd love a second, and then we'd love a positive vote.
Yeah, that's a good slide.
That's exactly what the sentence I wanted. Robert, go ahead.
I move we adopt the regulations or support the regulations.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
John is the second. Is there any discussion? I'm going to move towards a vote in a moment. I see Larry has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm opposed to moving forward with this without addition of a field validation aspect that replaces the actual measurement that we're stopping, and or being convinced by the information that Tad has given us that there is no way to do field validation, but that's hard for me to believe. As a scientist and engineer, there's always a way to do field validation of what you're being told by others. And absent that sort of provision, I am opposed to this.
Thanks for the great comment. Anybody else have a comment before we move to a vote? It'd be nice to know what's on your mind if you think it changes the result.
This is Megan. I agree with Larry. I kind of I feel like there's quality control, some sort of, you know, check on the system behind the scenes would make me much more supportive of this. It's my only hang up.
Thank you for your comment. Appreciate it.
And I'd like to weigh in myself. I'm in agreement with Larry and Megan.
Good. And so what I'm going to ask for a vote on this is, remember how remind everyone, the council makes recommendations to the secretary based on what we hear, and like a checkpoint before they move forward or don't move forward with a regulation or advisory. We don't get the veto, but they usually listen to us. So just so everyone's aware of how the council works and in this scheme of things.
Mr.
All right,
Chairman.
last chance for a comment, Dr. Salwich.
So thanks for a great discussion. Just to try to put an envelope around what I'm hearing from those who have expressed some opposition to this, I wonder if MD has thought of this. I mean, could you have a selection where you kind of randomly select cars that are less than 6 years old that have to come in for an inspection? And I know that's very difficult because no one would like to get that, but that could be a way to try to verify. What I'm hearing from Larry and others and from the delegate is verify. And sadly for auto emissions, we know that probably is important. So has there been, what thought has, if any, has been behind trying to bring in a segment of the vehicles for testing to just see, you know, if the assumptions behind this are actually true?
So I think there's been a misunderstanding of the amount of verification and data that is behind the decisions that we're making or we're proposing in the regulation. There is a huge amount of data and a huge amount of verification. And just California by itself, the analyses they've done. Now, if the council wants to meet once a week for the next year and we can go through all that, we'd be happy to do that. And without that, historically, you've had to sort of trust in the technical folks and the experts at MDE to go. And I've spent my 30-year career being honest with people about issues. You have never heard me lead you in a wrong direction about something that might not be the right thing for air quality. If anything, I've been the opposite. So we'd be happy to do all that. There is a timing piece of this. We'd love to move forward with this today. And to be honest with you, we could do a meeting a week if that's what AQCAC wants, to go through all the verification and all the testing and all the data. But I'm telling you, it's there. This is an old program. It really is not a key part of what we need to do to continue to make progress on ozone. It is a major customer service initiative that is long overdue. We can do whatever the council wants, but is the council willing to put that kind of time in to I mean, I will get criticism. I will get criticism because this PowerPoint today was too long.
But
it
Ted,
was longer than we wanted. It was longer than we wanted. And there's a lot of, you heard me actually going into slides that I forgot we took out because it was too long. So we can do that, but I really think it's not a valuable use of the council's time. And it's really not a valuable thing to do if your goal is to continue to clean up Maryland's air.
I want to move towards a vote pretty quickly because I like to keep to their agenda time. We have a half hour left to do another whole rule. Would anyone really object if we just move to a vote now? It would give guidance to the situation. And Robert, I see your hand up. I'll listen. I'm on the list. I'm just trying to move it along.
I just want to move the question. I move the
I agree
question.
with you. I agree with you. So we have a motion and a second on the table, and we're ready to vote. I think you dropped off, Dr. Hobbs. Are you back?
I'm here.
All right, good to see you. It disappeared for a little while. So I'm going to move for the vote.
Well, Ross had a question. There's more discussion. I wanted to hear what Ross.
I didn't see it. I'm sorry, I didn't see.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to respond to Tad. Tad, no, we don't want a meeting a week, but a synopsis of that data would have been very helpful today. Just a synopsis of it, the Cliff Notes version of it, as opposed to the long historical stuff, which, those on the council we've seen innumerable times.
And a specific answer to Ross's question: has sampling, validation by sampling been considered?
And that's absolutely on the table, and that's been directed to MDE. But I just want to be efficient with the administration of this meeting, so I'm calling for a vote. All in favor of approving the rule as recommended by MDE, please make it known.
Yes. Aye.
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 I think we should.
We'll go through the whole roll. Carolyn, could you call the roll, because I can't see everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, sure. Todd Chasen,
Aye.
Larry Schoen,
No.
Tom Keelan,
Nay.
Ross Salowich,
Nay.
Dr. Hobbs,
Yes.
Dr. Amar,
Yes.
Megan Latshaw,
Nay.
Nicole Haybear,
Aye.
Jonathan Caves,
Yes. Yay.
and Robert Wright. Oh. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'm in favor.
I think it's an aye, right? For some reason, your audio is a little jumbled right now.
When I have that problem, I just turn off the video for a minute, and then the audio seems to clear up.
I think we can assume, since you did propose the,
Yes.
vote.
I heard him. He said, I'm in favor. He said,
Great.
yes.
And John Coombe and John Quinn also.
Aye.
And John Quinn's an aye.
Okay. So I was counting 8 in favor and 4 opposed.
So we'll report in the minutes that it was not unanimous, which we often find that, but the council has been supportive and recommends approval.
And Carolyn, I believe that's 10-4.
Okay, well, yes, I'll definitely check the numbers. Sorry.
No problem.
That's what I counted on my paper. So good. Tad, would you introduce the second regulation?
John, I'll just leave a note. I know that there are folks that would like to see more on this. We appreciate the vote to move forward, but I would volunteer for those that are interested in spending some time on the questions that were asked. We'd be happy to do that. I feel very confident you'll be satisfied after we spend some time going through the issues you've raised. So, John, if that's something that you think would be good, or you get input from the commission, the council members, that would be something they'd want to do, I'm happy to do it.
I think you just schedule it. You just schedule it as a next council meeting, and people that are totally disinterested cannot attend, and we can not have a voting session that time.
Okay, great. So this next regulation is one that's also very important. It gets out a lot of the issues. Whoops,
Pipe in for
sorry.
a second. Just, let me save everybody time. There's some specific requests for information and data that have been made. So if you could respond to those before the meeting, that would be really saving of everyone's time.
That's no problem. So this next regulation, I'm sorry we're running a little bit late. I hope this one's going to go very quickly. It's a shorter briefing. It's in my opinion, something that is fairly straightforward approval. We have, over the past few years, found that tampering with emission control systems, particularly diesels and diesel trucks, has become a fairly significant issue. We have existing authority. We're already out doing some work looking for cases, but we wanted to adopt, or we wanted to strengthen our regulation to make it very clear what our authority is. We're going to go through it. I think hopefully it's one that's pretty straightforward. I'm going to do the first piece of it, and then Randy is going to chime in and do the second half. So next slide, Randy. A lot of work going on. Started with VW. This issue of tampering with vehicles is something that has, especially diesel vehicles, has grown in importance. It's not just the big trucks, it's smaller trucks as well. 5 years ago, I would have told you I did not think this is really a big issue in terms of potential emission reductions. However, that's changed. The research that's been done by EPA, other states, is now showing that this is a significant problem, and it's clearly linked to something we need to do to continue making progress on ozone. For the VEEP thing, we were talking about a 0.02 ton per day NOx reduction. We think there's a 5 ton per day NOx reduction associated with this initiative. So next slide, Randy. What is tampering? It's pretty basic. It's playing with anything on the vehicle that changes the certified emissions system. I think the piece that has been most underlooked is that a lot of these cases are people totally removing the emissions control system from the front to the back of the vehicle and just putting a straight pipe in. And again, these vehicles are not tested under the Vehicle Emissions Inspection Program, so there's no check on that piece. This is diesel vehicles mostly. There's also the piece that VW was caught for, which is tampering with the software system, the way the system works. And literally, the defeat devices are basically turning off the emission controls through a computer-based system at a certain point, because in theory, people think that that's going to get you more power and other things, which are not always the case. Next slide, Randy. Why? A bunch of reasons. People think it's going to get more power and more torque, make their vehicle more powerful. Better fuel economy, that is not always the case. There's this sort of crazy concept that people like to have a lot of exhaust coming out of their vehicle or rolling coal. There's a theory that there will be reduced maintenance costs. However, any maintenance on a tampered with vehicle is on an illegal vehicle. So, there are a lot of misunderstandings about these issues. A lot of folks that are tampering with their vehicles don't even know that it's illegal. And that tampering with your vehicle can nullify the vehicle's warranty. And so there's a lot of misinformation, and we are long overdue in getting serious about this problem. Again, 5 years ago, I did not think this was a big deal. I think it has turned into a big deal. Does link to both increased emissions of NOx and increased emissions of PM. EPA has done a lot of research on this category, and their number, New Jersey's number, is higher, is that probably 13% of diesel pickup trucks have been tampered with, either fully removing or partially removing the vehicle emissions control system. New Jersey is probably the state that's done the most work on that, and I think their number approaches like 18%. So this is a lot of vehicles. And the reductions that would be taking place without the tampering, it's about equivalent to adding 9 million trucks to our roads. So this has gone from something we didn't think was all that critical to something that over the past 4 or 5 years has become much higher on our list. So next slide, please. Randy, where do we do the transition? I can't remember where you jump in.
Right, Ted. I think I had discussed with you earlier about me taking over when we got to the regs themselves, but I can jump in anywhere.
Okay, no, I'm good. I'm good. So more emissions numbers. EPA's estimated 100,000 excess tons of NOx and 890 tons of PM in the mid-Atlantic states over the next decade. A huge number of vehicles, again, have been tampered with. And that in Maryland, the estimate is that that we have over about 6,000 diesel trucks operating with tampered control equipment or defeat devices. Again, that's probably equivalent to about 2 to 3 to 4 tons per day. And the PM emissions are not as big, but they're also very important. So next slide, please. Yes, this started with the Volkswagen scandal. Yes, VW broke the law. It's done a lot in terms of the trust of the industry. However, we have implemented huge number of emission control programs because of the penalties associated with. There's a Volkswagen trust. We've implemented about 40 projects, about $76 million worth of projects, and the PM and NOx reductions have been dramatically, and they are helping us. Again, this is where it started, but a lot of research has gone in, especially to the smaller operations. It's not just the VWs who make the cars. It's the auto body shops who fix cars or repair cars. It's potentially dealerships who also do repair work, and it can be auto auctions as well. Next slide, please. So again, I said I had to have the mute button for my dogs. Sorry about that. A delivery man. The delivery man always gets them. So other states have moved forward, but we are clearly in the front of the pack on this. Probably the state in our area that's done the most is New Jersey. We will be moving forward with this. We've already started these works. We've got discussions already going on with Delaware, the District of Columbia, and Pennsylvania. They're slightly behind us. And we have already started to reach out to dealers, repair shops, auto body shops, letting them know that we're looking at this. We probably have, 10 to 15 significant investigations going on. And again, we already have the authority we need to take action. The regulations today are just to clarify that authority. Next slide, please. I'm going to hand it off to Randy here, and he's going to go through existing the current requirements and then the regs, and hopefully get to a vote quickly.
Great, thanks, Ted. So as Tad mentioned earlier, this regulation is not completely brand new. Maryland has had tampering regulations on the books since 1989. Our existing OMR 2611-2002 codifies much of the regulations that prohibit the tampering or removal of motor vehicle emission controls, as well as regulations prohibiting the operation of a motor vehicle that has had their pollution equipment tampered with. And there are significant penalties, civil penalties that may result by violating those provisions. In addition to the Maryland regulations, the Federal Clean Air Act contains 2 relevant requirements. both dealing with the tampering with motor vehicles, engine or emission components, as well as any person that manufactures or sells, installs parts that are designed to defeat or bypass the emission controls. It's also a crime through the Clean Air Act to affect the onboard diagnostic system that are set up, that are a monitoring device required to be on all vehicles. And we've been working very closely in partnership with the EPA. EPA has done a number of actions recently to really step up their efforts in this area. In last year in November, they updated their enforcement policy on the vehicles and engine tampering and aftermarket defeat devices. Those links have been provided in both our fact sheets, and they're accessible through this presentation as well. All this material is up on our AQCAC website, so the links are active. You can click and read these reports in detail, as well as all of our some of the quotes on the emission reductions and things of that nature are all contained in both EPA and Marama documents that we extracted that information. Recent EPA enforcement activity has really stepped up as well, and EPA has released a press release detailing this information. So there's been over the past 5 years, there's been over 60 civil tampering cases that have been handled by EPA. So what we're proposing with this regulation is to update our existing regulations that we have on the books to really clarify and expand the tampering requirements that we have in place. What you see in your package is that we are looking to repeal the existing sections of A through C.
Does your internet go down? Are you on it?
The existing regulations we have in place, 2611, 2002, and replacing that with new sections A through G. So essentially, we're going to be maintaining the same type of regulations that prohibit the tampering of the vehicle as well as the operation, but we're expanding it to also include the prohibitions of the manufacture, sale, installation, and use of any device that prevents the air pollution control system from operating as originally designed. We are also adding in clarification that requires a vehicle dealer or business that sells, auctions, or transfers a vehicle to maintain records on site, and confirming that the vehicles are in operating conditions at the time of the sale, that they meet the original OEM specs. And it also codifies the department's rights to conduct these inspections and surveillance of new and used motor vehicles. These similar type provisions already exist within our CALEV regulations, and just codifying in these regulations as well. So essentially, the proposed regulation applies to any person who services an emission-related aspect of the vehicle, the engine, or the equipment, a person that manufactures, distributes, or installs any emission-related parts, a person who offers for sale, leases, auctions, or sells a transfer or transfers a motor vehicle, and a person who operates a motor vehicle. There are exemptions that are set up within the regulation in that it does not apply to the sale or transfer of a motor vehicle for the purpose of it being scrapped. They do need to go through the process of getting a certificate of salvage issued by the Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration and have that sufficient documentation to prove just that. The proposed regulation also does not prevent the service or repair of any air pollution control system with the intention of having it function as required. And the regulation does not apply to motorcycles. There are also new record-keeping requirements that are set up that people will need to keep on site for a period of 5 years, records that must be made available to the department on request, and contains the following information on vehicles, the date of sale or transfer of the vehicle, the fuel type, the basic description of the vehicle, the make, model, and year, the VIN number, and basically a statement attesting that all air pollution control systems are in place and operating. Also codifying our compliance inspections, that the department or its agents have the right to conduct these inspections. They may be conducted on the premises and extend all emission-related parts in their operation. Basically, they may require the testing and operation of the vehicle to ensure they are functioning as designed, and also inspection of all related records associated with that vehicle. And additional measure to point out that refusal to allow or interference with such inspections are also considered a violation of this regulation. And these non-compliance actions can be compounding, each one being a separate violation. And we do have a series of tampering web links that describe the program in much more depth and detail, how they work. Notices of our compliance advisory that has already been sent out to stakeholders and trade associations that deal in this arena, as well as this is a regulation that could affect small businesses. We do have requirements that we set up a small business notification website, which we have done in accordance with requirements of House Bill 1124. So we do have active investigations ongoing. We've, as I had mentioned, both EPA and MDE has stepped up operations in this area. Our schedule pretty much follows what you had heard previously in the VEEP regulation. The notice of proposed action will show up in the Maryland Register in September, with a public hearing being held in this October, hopefully, if all goes as planned. Notice of final action in December with an effective reg in January. So that is it. We're here to handle any questions you may have in this area. We do have our gifted and talented compliance and mobile sources program staff available to address your technical questions, which I'm sure you will have.
I see Jonathan's hand up first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So two questions. First of all, the 5-year thing, record keeping, this seems pretty excessive to me, especially for small businesses and others. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay.
If somebody's not on mute, if everyone could look to see if they're muted, and there seems to be questions whether you're connected. The answer is yes, and you're disrupting the
And it's a phone line. I can't mute, through the webinar. So if someone on the phone should check their connection. Thanks.
Okay. So yeah, about the 5-year time frame, and my other question is, I guess a compliance officer or something can go into a business, but can a police officer or somebody actually stop somebody on the road to for a emissions inspection?
Tad, either you or maybe John or Susan would like to answer.
Yeah, so the way that this program will work is through investigating the repair shops, the dealers, or the auto auctions that are either doing the tampering or selling tampered vehicles. There is not a part of this program right now that would do roadside stops, because let's face it, you wouldn't even be able to do that until you looked. The existing law is where the owner and operator comes in. That's just part of the existing law. I just can't. But what is most interesting about this initiative is that the folks that are doing the tampering often advertise it on the internet or in the media, and so then once we've done an investigation, after we see things like that, then we will we're doing a lot of training with our compliance staff right now, because let's face it, our compliance staff is mostly focused on smokestacks But at some point, we will be going into shops and looking at tampered vehicles. And we think the actual communication about pushing this issue is going to provide some real benefits right from the start, because we think a lot of folks will move away from the tampering because it's being looked at. So, but no, there will not be roadside stops.
I mean, that to me is a, threshold there. Definitely don't want any part of that. So what about the 5-year, the compliance time for keeping records? It just seems excessively long to me. I don't know.
Susan, John, that was part of the existing requirements, correct?
Well,
This is John. No, that was brought on using the typical timekeeping requirements for other permits like the Title V, but that's a new part of the rule.
And
I just think that's very long.
The other reason we like to have it for 5 years is, okay, this is Susan Nash, I'm an inspector. One of the reasons we're doing this is so that we can go out and say, go to a car dealership or go somewhere and perform an inspection. There's a lot of them and there's not a lot of inspectors. And if I roll up on a car dealership that I haven't been to in a while, I want to be able to get a real feel for a couple of things. For example, how much of their business is diesel vehicles, because that's what we're focused on right now, class 2B and 3 diesel trucks. And I need to be able to understand that, and I need to have a pretty good length of time to look at that. And also the fact is it may take us some time to get to different dealerships, and I might need those records going back a few years to be able to understand what's going on.
I guess my feeling is that you're putting a lot on businesses for the convenience of inspectors, and to me it would seem like 2 or 3 years would be a reasonable amount of time to carry records on something. It just seems 5 years just seems extremely excessive to me.
I mean, I
it
think
puts upon private businesses to do that.
I think a lot of the records are probably electronic now.
Well, even so. So,
Jonathan, I think it's been our experience that maintaining records for 5 years is not anything we've gotten a lot of pushback on, or actually very difficult these days. So I think we're comfortable with that. If the council wants to push us to go in a different direction, we'll think about that.
I just think 3 years would be better.
I feel like don't we have to keep records for 7 years for the IRS? I mean, to me, 5 years when you have electronic records, like, why not keep them? We have so much space nowadays.
I think you have to keep 3 records 3 years for IRS. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, we don't have to
I
debate
think
this
for
right now.
commercial entities, I think it's 7.
Oh.
Let me just do all the questions and then we can come back. I saw John Coombe next.
Thank you, John. Ted, it sounds like the emphasis, as you said, is now being put on the parties in the system that have a profit motive for getting around the law more than the actual vehicle owners, which are potentially penalized under the existing system. But in terms of the motivation of the owners, you talked about a certain fraction are interested in doing it to increase the power of the vehicle or improve their mileage, etc. I suppose there's also some sense among some members of the ownership community that once they buy the vehicle, it's theirs to do with as they choose. But what's being done to sort of get at that segment that takes these steps out of ignorance, either out of ignorance of the law or ignorance about what the true impacts on the vehicle performance and cost to maintain might be?
Yeah, so John, we talked about that issue quite a bit, and our Attorney General's office is looking at that piece, and we do think that sometime this is our first step in this process, and that may be something we end up dealing with later. It may come under a different part of our law in terms of consumer protection, Maryland law, not not MDE law. But it is something we've looked at, and it is something that that we know is important. It's just not, this first step is simply, to be totally honest with you, we're looking at the low-hanging fruit in this problem. That one is one that's a little more complicated. Our attorney generals are looking at it.
Yeah, this is John. So I'm just going to suggest that I looked, there's a communication strategy associated with that, which will go a long way towards that. But it's 11:27 and we're scheduled till 11:30. We're going to be going past. Is there anyone that has to leave at 11:30 on the council that wants to make any statement before they go, if they have to leave? Otherwise, I can go over, but I'm not sure everyone else can. Larry, you're up next with your question then.
Yeah, I have a comment about the record keeping. I mean, I am a small businessman as well as being an engineer, and the biggest problem that I would have is if I have a computer crash or computer glitch. So I guess the question I would have for enforcement people is how much understanding is there when somebody has something like that happen. And then the broader question I have, actually, I'm supportive of the regulation. But I do have a question. So when I seem to hear a lot more noisy vehicles on the road these days with custom exhaust. Is there a correlation between that and the emissions of the vehicle?
Potential is there.
Larry, I don't have any analytics on that, but I think there is. We could probably do some research. I don't know if the New Jersey folks are linking the loudness of a vehicle to the removal of the control system and just putting a straight pipe in, but it is logical, but I don't have any data on that. And yes, our enforcement people are very understanding when something outside the control of the company happens, like a computer crash. And that does happen, but again, it has to clearly be outside the control of the company. If it's an intentional issue, then we're not as sympathetic.
But what's the penalty for that if you don't have 7 years of records?
And you knew that the law was in place and you intentionally decided not to follow the law, the penalties can be significant.
Well, how do you, all right, maybe this isn't the weeds, but how do you prove that someone did something intentionally, I guess?
We get into those discussions. We do that all the time. It's not always easy. It involves lawyers sometimes.
I'd just be more comfortable with a shorter period of time, personally.
Ted, I can answer the question about the noise if the commenter is interested.
Thanks, John.
Sure. So as part of our training, we've asked the same question, like, does the noise, loud diesel noise, equal removed emission controls? And the answer is no. Like, removing the muffler is what generally contributes to the loud noise. However, oftentimes a truck with someone who removes their muffler will also remove the rest of their emission control system. So there's certainly a correlation, but it's not a causation. But if you're driving on the road, the biggest tell is a very large exhaust pipe. More often than not, a truck with a very large exhaust pipe, or that's emitting any visible smoke, would be one whose pollution controls have been removed.
For automobiles, for cars, there is a very popular segment of just catback exhausts, so they're not necessarily defeating the emissions, but they are making the vehicle louder in most instances.
Most of them are under 22, 20.
Any other questions from the council?
Hi, this is Nicole Abear with BMC, and I do have a couple of questions. I was curious why motorcycles are exempted.
I just don't think we have the data that says there's any problem with motorcycles. We have plenty of data that says there's a problem with the small trucks and large trucks focused on diesel. So again, over time we may do something, but right now motorcycles are not part of the problem we're trying to address.
Okay. And then my second question might also be a little bit in the weeds, but I just noticed in the anti-tampering prohibitions portion of the recommended changes to COMAR. So it's part D, number 4. It talks about a person may not offer for sale, lease, sell, so on and so forth, a vehicle has an air pollution control system that has been tampered with, removed, or otherwise not functional as designed by the original manufacturer. And I just wanted, I wanted to hone in on that portion saying as designed by the original manufacturer. And I just wanted to make sure that, you know, there wouldn't be an issue or this wouldn't be like a loophole for folks to get away from not having emission controls on their vehicle.
John or Susan, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll take it. So I think the intent was to make this as broad as possible. Like if you are offering for sale a vehicle with pollution controls that are not there or are not operational, then that's a violation of this rule. From the training that we've taken so far, it's not really going to be a gray area in the vast majority of these cases. The truck will have a straight pipe like from the engine all the way through. So we're not anticipating like having to split hairs saying, well, the pollution controls is not functioning as designed by the manufacturer. It really should be pretty obvious, and enforcement will be a picture of a truck with no exhaust control system.
Okay, I guess my question here is, it sounds like, I don't know very much about the manufacturing of trucks, but it sounds like these vehicles are required, the manufacturer is required to put a air pollution control system in the vehicle. So it sounds like my concern is that's not going to be of concern.
Right, yes. I mean, the way that works is that the manufacturer has to certify the pollution control system, and there's a label underneath your hood that tells you what pollution controls were installed by the manufacturer. So as we're envisioning the inspection process, looking at the label saying these are the controls that should be on the truck and confirming that those controls are there.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions from the group?
Yeah, I'm not so much a question, I have a statement about the 5 years. I just think I'd be willing to go 7 years. I just think you have to give the inspectors all the tools they need to do their job properly. And, you know, there's no sense, if it's done on a computer, I don't see what the difference is. I'm okay with the 5 years.
Well, my suggestion is let me ask you, are there people outside the council?
John, I had a question.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I missed it.
Thanks. Yeah, I put it in chat, but no worries. So very brief comment. I do find it ironic, highly ironic, that we're talking about defeat devices after, you know, the first vote to approve, you know, the OBD, but whatever. The question does turn back to cars. So we're talking a lot about trucks, and I don't question the validity of this. I suspect there is cheating, and the reason is the truck will get greater, you know, miles per gallon without having the emission controls. But what's kind of the basis of the focus on trucks? Like, do we know how much cheating is done on cars? That's the first question. And, you know, if cheating is done on cars, my guess, this is totally speculative, is it's largely outside of the dealers. It's probably person to person, because, you know, that's often how cars are sold. So do we have any insight into how prevalent within the state the defeat of the emission controls are on cars? And if so, the prevalence in person to person versus dealer?
Again, certain states like New Jersey have done a lot of work on this, and EPA has done a lot of work. And I think that the data shows clearly that small and large diesel trucks are the #1 category. There is some tampering that takes place on smaller vehicles and non-diesel vehicles, but this part of this sector is clearly the area to start with. So, Ross, I'm not saying that those things will never be looked at by us, but we're starting off with the piece that's a clear-cut major impediment to continuing to make clean air progress, which is the diesel trucks and the smaller and larger sizes. So, but it's something we'll keep looking at. Like I said, this is phase 1 of what might be a multi-step process.
Do we have any other? I'm sorry, I missed your question earlier. Anybody else did it? Oh, you have another one, Ross?
No, I was just gesturing weirdly.
Oh. Yeah, no, you were acknowledging my apology. Anybody else have a question or comment on the council have a question or comment for MDE? Carolyn, is there anyone that's asked to speak from outside this group?
No, I'm not seeing anything.
So I'm open to a motion to approve. I don't see there's the same kind of discussion necessary we had for the first rule.
Larry, so moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? People want to get any last points in before we call for the vote?
I'll just, resurrect my suggestion for 5 years. But I'm still, I think the the regulation is good. Just that's my only.
You could suggest an amendment to Larry's motion if you'd like.
Well, I'd suggest an amendment for changing the record keeping to 5 years.
Is there a second to that motion?
I thought it was proposed.
It is 5 years.
5 years.
I think it is 5 years.
You said he meant from 5 years to 3 years.
3 years. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That was the basis of his comment, so I assumed. So is there a second to that motion? I'm not hearing one.
Not very popular, so.
No, so we won't consider that motion. We'll go through the roll call again, if you could help me, Carolyn, just because it's easier. All in favor of approving the regulations, please signify when Carolyn mentions your name.
Okay, yeah, Todd Chasen,
Aye.
Larry Schoen,
Yes.
Tom Keelan,
Killeen, just to help you out, but yes.
so sorry.
That's fine.
Dr. Solowich,
Yes.
Dr. Hobbs,
He just
Yes.
sat down. He may not know what's going on.
Yes.
oh, I
Sorry.
got you. Great, thank you. Dr. Amar,
Yes.
Megan Latshaw,
Yes, aye.
thank you. Nicole Haybear,
Aye.
Jonathan Kays,
Aye.
Robert Wright.
Yes. Hey, aye.
Great, thank you. John Coombe
Aye.
and John Quinn.
Yes.
Okay, well, I record that as unanimous, and I am recording that there are 12 members in attendance, so that's for the record.
Thank you so much. Tad, is there any final business because we are past time?
No, I really appreciate the council's time and effort on this. These are both two important initiatives, and usually we don't have two important things on the agenda. Appreciate everybody's time and hope everybody has a great week.
I hear a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Everybody said bye. Have a good summer.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
This conference will now be recorded.